Another world, another time, in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Trial by Stone!
This is what I came for.
Your vital essence, the Dark Crystal.
I can feel something. Hear it almost.
Don't move.
Don't move? Where would I go?
Quiet!
Here's your host, Philip Mitchell. Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone, and this is episode 60 of the podcast. On this episode, we've got a special guest on the show. His name is Douglas Bodine, and he's one of the main moderators behind the Facebook group called The Crystal Shard, a Dark Crystal fan group. So, Doug, I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me.
No worries, and it's been such a great time for all things Dark Crystal as we sort of continue anticipating with Age of Resistance that's going to come out sometime next year, and getting little details here and there that sort of trickle down, of course, on the Trial by Stone Facebook page. It's pretty much any scoops that sort of pop up at our end, we'll spread the word. I guess I just really wanted to chat to you because I know I think you're new to the community, and you recently started this the Crystal Shard Facebook group, so we'll get into that later on in the show. But I just wanted to ask you, Doug, how were you introduced to the Dark Crystal? How did you discover the Dark Crystal?
I've been a Dark Crystal fan since the very beginning. So I was 7 years old in 1982 in Southern California. And I can remember I can still remember going to the theater that night to see it. I can remember standing outside of the theater. I can remember holding my dad's hand, walking into the theater. And then I just remember just being blown away by the movie. 7 years old, right? I mean, of course, everything is going to be miraculous at that age. Star Wars was big, but Dark Crystal came and it was something completely different. And so from that moment on, I was hooked. Yeah,
I mean, it was a film unlike anything. I mean, especially when it came out, in the cinemas at the time in 1982. It was just nothing like it at the time. Of course, you had Star Wars, which I know that there would always be comparisons to. But in regards of just being a complete fantasy film with no actors, it is an incredible feat, and it still is to this day. Almost more than 35 years later. Yeah.
Well, I have not seen another movie quite like it. I mean, we have Lord of the Rings, we have Star Wars, we have Harry Potter. We have all kinds of movies that are very good on their own. But when you compare them to Dark Crystal, it seems like Dark Crystal is it's in a category all by itself. It's a masterwork of puppetry. It's a masterwork of cinematography. It's a masterwork of storytelling. And so it just has everything that captures the imagination with it. So it's very easy, especially when you were my age, to fall in love with it quickly and then to hold on to it well into adulthood.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I mean, many of the listeners probably have heard about how I got into the Dark Crystal, but it was, for me, I was sort of through, the VHS era, watching on the VHS tape of the film, and just completely blown away with the world, and, just seeing all the, all the creatures coming to life, in a way that we've never seen them before. It's just such an incredible film.
So believe it or not, I did not have any Dark Crystal movie-going experience after the movie until I bought the VHS in 1995. So the only time I would ever see the Dark Crystal is when it replayed on things like HBO, or there was an ABC Sunday night movie and it replayed the Dark Crystal. So I did not get to watch it over and over and over again. I went to the theater, saw it in the theater, and the only thing I had were things like the read along and the comic and the picture novel. So that was it.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, especially back in the days, there was quite a few Dark Crystal material, but there wasn't as big as what it was going to potentially be. I mean, I think even at the time there was going to be the Hasbro action figurines that were going to be planned to be come out, but they just sort of fell through. But luckily, I mean, we did get sort of the Funko reaction figures that sort of came out a year or two ago. So that was kind of cool that they sort of, recapture that, old classic action figure, 80s vibe to it. Yeah.
Yeah, if they would have had action figures when I was growing up, they would have been right beside my Star Wars action figures and my
Yeah.
GI Joes. They would have been playing right with them.
Yeah, yeah, me too. Having weird crossovers, with those two, Star Wars and the Dark Crystal. So no, which is really cool. And I guess it's been really really exciting with Dark Crystal recently, especially within the last year when Netflix and Jim Henson Company, they got together and announced that they're going to do a Dark Crystal prequel series called Age of Resistance. I might actually ask, like, what was your reaction like when you found out that wow, they're actually going to do a Dark Crystal series? Yeah.
To be honest, so before the Age of Resistance came out, that they did an announcement for they were going to try to do another movie, The Power of the Dark Crystal, and before that became a comic series and everything like that. And so when that announcement came out, instantly the little kid in me goes, "Oh my goodness, yes, 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 please!" And then it gets canceled, right? And so you feel let down. And then we move on to Age of Resistance and we hear this big announcement and you're like, yes, but wait, should I get excited?
Yeah, of course, because I mean, I definitely remember the announcement back in I think it was around 2005 when they first announced that. Yep, we're going to do this Dark Crystal sequel, Power of the Dark Crystal, and I think they actually announced that they were going to at least do some animated projects. Sort of, I think they were going to take place before the events of the film. And I was like really amped about it, especially this was a time when Star Wars Episode 3 came out or was about to come out, and at the time was going to be the end of the whole Star Wars films. No more Star Wars films. Little do we know 10 years later that it would just come back in a big way with the sequel trilogy and all the Star Wars story films
Right.
that have come out in the years since. But yeah, and that was another big thing was at the time when they were going to film in Sydney, which is a 3 hour flight away from where I live in Melbourne. So I remember being really amped about it, and I think I vaguely remember even just sending them an email, or I think even giving a resume. This is probably when I was like 16 or 18. I can't remember, but yeah, it was.
Just hoping that you can get connected to
Yeah,
it somehow.
yeah, just to get on that set. But yeah, of course, I think it was around 2012 or probably even earlier than that it sort of got officially cancelled. And yeah, it was a bit it was a bit disappointing. But I mean, it was good at least that we got the comic book series that they did, Power of the Dark Crystal, 12-issue series. And despite I know there's a bit of criticisms about with the comic book series with Power of the Dark Crystal. I'm just sort of glad that at least they eventually brought the story to life in some way. Yeah.
But for the Age of Resistance, though, I'm actually very excited because with Age of Resistance, we actually had a little bit of a trailer and we had a little bit of a hint of what it's going to look like, because it looks like we see like a young Skek Tech turning around, and just that little bit is enough to ignite the flames of passion again. You're just like, okay, there was a real puppet, there was a real frame, I could see this, and so it makes you excited. And I think that with Age of Resistance, we've seen, because I think people know that it's actually going to happen, we've seen a resurgence of interest in the Dark Crystal. We've seen more fans that are coming forward, more fans that are being more vocal about what it is that they want to see. So I also think that when when Age of Resistance is finally released and people watch it, the Dark Crystal fandom is going to be something that explodes.
Yeah, I mean that is sort of the big thing. Just once the show comes out, once we get more information, that there'll definitely be a lot more interest for new fans or people that are fans of other franchises. Like, oh wow, this is something incredible that'd be worth checking out. And I mean that's sort of it has sort of increased quite a bit since I think when they initially announced that New York Comic Con, the Netflix and Chills panel, that at least got some attention, even though
which I watched completely with bated breath, hoping that they would show a clip, and never did.
I know, and even myself, like I was watching it live, and I did chat on the previous episode with Jamie Prater about the for those. There's an episode, the previous episode, episode 59, which is titled Anticipating the Resistance. And it was just Jamie and I, we sort of went through that Netflix and Chills, that 10-minute kind of video section that was dedicated to the Dark Crystal. And I guess we might as well talk about, from an increase of interest with all things Dark Crystal. You yourself started your own Facebook group called the Crystal Shard, Dark Crystal fan group. So and I just want to say congratulations on launching it. I know it's pretty new, but it's a great group. Maybe you can let viewers know or listeners know just a bit about what the Crystal Shard Facebook fan group is all about.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's all in the name. It's a Dark Crystal fan group. So there's a few really good fan groups already on Facebook. I mean, there's Dream Fasting, and then there's Age of Resistance.
Yes. Yeah.
They're both really good groups, and they have a lot of members. But I just wanted to start my own group, and just to see how many people would be willing to join me on my little Dark Crystal geek out. And so far I've had quite a few people join me on it. In fact, I've had more people join me than I thought were actually going to be interested, and I've had some really good interactions with some of the group members. Jamie, like you mentioned before,
yes.
He approached me very early on, and I wanted to know if I needed any help, and if I wanted him, I could call on him to be an admin, and I took him up on the offer. So I made him an admin of the group, and it's been going really well. We've met some good people, some people that you and I know together. We know, Ethan, and he's a great guy. He has a lot of opinions about the Dark Crystal, and I love every single one of them.
Yeah, no, he's
very
great,
knowledgeable.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, very knowledgeable, and every post he sort of posts about the Dark Crystal, there'll be sort of new things that I take from it, whether it's like the symbology or like even just poking fun at Dark Crystal, in a fun, lighthearted way. So it is.
The one thing he does is he makes you look at something that you may have looked at 100 times, and then go, oh wow, I never thought of that. Yeah, I've seen that scene a gazillion times. Why did I not catch that?
Yeah, and I mean that's something that myself and Jamie we've been doing actually with a little podcast that we do as part of the Trial by Stone called the Dark Crystal Minute. So in each episode, we chat about each minute within the Dark Crystal. So it's like about a 95 episode series, and I think we're up to episode 10, I think. So we've still got a long way to go.
You're in for the long haul, then.
Yeah.
You've got a long ways ahead.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, so. And that's been kind of cool, just putting them out once a month for now. But I'm sure down the track, I think once we get a release date for Age of Resistance, then we'll increase the amount of shows releasing them.
I think we're going to have a lot of content that's going to come out when Age of Resistance hits. And
yes, yeah. And
it's going to, like I said, I think it's going to explode. Everybody's going to have an opinion. Everybody's going to be talking about what it is that they loved. There might even be some people talking about what it is that they don't like, which I hope is not a lot. I hope everybody just absolutely falls in love with it and it takes off. But I I think it's great.
Yeah, no, it is awesome. Yeah, it is.
It's a great time to
yeah.
be a Dark Crystal fan.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and just so much content. You know, even for new fans to sort of jumping into it first time. You know, if you're jumping into it right now, you've got the comic books as well, and the young adult novels to sort of catch up on. So so it is pretty cool. You know, to sort of jump into it right now. As we just continue, you know, waiting with bated breath, you know, for any
Absolutely.
more information on Age of Resistance. Yeah.
Every day, one day closer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
To whatever date that is.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I guess, you know, what are you like looking forward to the most with the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance?
Oh, there's a lot of stuff I really want to see. And there's also things I want to feel too, right? I mean, it's not just about watching it and getting it. I also want to feel things. But the things I want to see, I think first and foremost is I want to see some Gelfling culture. I want to see how that is more than just two characters, right? I want to see some of these relationships. I want to see how their society was. I want to see how they interacted with each other. I want to see what that was all about, right? To see, one, besides the prophecy, why the Skeksis were so intent on destroying them. I mean, I know that the prophecy is a very big drive for that, but their culture had to have been something that they were scared of too. So I think I want to see that. And speaking of the Skeksis, I want to see those guys too. You know, I want to see them a little bit younger, a little bit more spry. I want to see them a little bit more cunning, and maybe see the Gartham Master, Mr. Skig Kung, be a Gartham Master. You know what I mean? Go out there and lead some charges. And maybe I'm expecting too much from 10 hours, but I hope not.
Yeah. No, I think it's pretty reasonable. Yeah, no, there's a lot to look forward to. Yeah. Yeah, so the Gelfling culture I'm really interested in knowing more about, especially we know that there is 7 different types of Gelfling clans, you know, within the timeline of the show. So for me, that's something I'm really looking forward to. And just seeing, and I mean, I think like, and as you know, as much as I'm gonna love seeing the Skeksis and, you know, an Olgra potentially, and probably the Podlings in the mix. I'm really curious.
Olgra has to be in it. You can't have a prequel without her in it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, you know, with her being on the show. Of course, there has been, you know, some voice cast announcements that sort of got leaked, but they're unconfirmed at this stage. And I think Helena
confirmed, unconfirmed.
Yeah, I think it was Helena Bonham Carter was one of them.
And Jason Isaacs.
Yeah, Jason Isaacs and Katrina Belf, I think, from Outlander, and there was and the other one was Gwendolyn Christie.
Gwendolyn Christie, yeah, that was the other one I was trying to.
Of course, Star Wars as well. So those had been leaked, I think accidentally, and I think myself, I sort of, you know, predicting that Helena will probably voice Olgra in the show. So.
I think that would be a good safe bet. I think she would be able to do that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and
in fact, she probably could do multiple voices. If they use her that way, they could probably use her as a Gelfling.
Yeah, also, yeah.
Depending on the interactions that they have with her. But the thing I was thinking about though is we talk about the prequel and going back into the history of the Dark Crystal, I kind of have this thought in the back of my head that I'm hoping that they don't completely pull a Star Wars on us and erase some of that stuff that people have set up, right? Some of the writers have already created, like the Gelfling clans and things like that, because we don't get any hint of that in the original movie. In the original movie, all we get is the ruins, the prophecy, and we see just a small fraction of what the Gelfling culture is. We don't know anything about clans if we watch the movie. We don't know anything about any of that stuff. So realistically, they could pull a Star Wars and go a completely different direction that people aren't even thinking. Just because if they want to go by a screen canon point of view, they could do that. I'm hoping not. I'm just
No. It'll be really interesting to see how it all sort of plays out, and I know that probably the big thing would be about, with the Gelflings, sort of, the fate of all the Gelflings, because I mean in the film it's sort of implied that they were all sort of wiped out, and 2 survived, but for the events of Power the Dark Crystal to have happened, you'd have to expect that, maybe, some did survive, or they sort of, I don't know, I always sort of imagine that they sort of got on their boats and just sort of, went far away from
a different way.
Yeah.
Well, I remember Brian Froud and Jim Henson and Frank Oz all implying that there's things happening on the world of Thrawn that we are not seeing. And that it's very possible that on the other side of the planet, far away from the castle, there are Gelfling cultures that are alive and well at that time. It's just that in the areas around the castle where that they had the most influence with the Gartham attacks and things like that, that's where they would concentrate wiping out the Gelfling culture. So that way there was none in the region or locally that could fulfill the prophecy.
Yeah.
It makes sense to me that there would be Gelfling on the planet somewhere else.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Just being far away from the Skeksis, where they can't be taken.
Right.
Yeah, so it's going to be really interesting to see, how that will play out in the show. I mean, if it does, I mean, that's the other thing, because I mean, we've got 10 episodes,
right.
And even though we
and it could be just one season, right? Where we're going to have multiple seasons of Age of Resistance, which would be a dream. Let's face it. I mean, that would be even better. I mean, to find out that we're getting more Dark Crystal, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
So,
and I think if they were going to announce a second season, it will I reckon they'll probably announce it probably before the show even comes out, because I mean they've got all the puppets, after they finish filming
have all the sets already.
Yeah, all the sets, which of course sets gets taken down, but of course they pretty much keep everything that was made on the show, so it all being storage facilities and whatnot. So
absolutely,
it's sort of a thing these days.
It would be a shame if the show was a very big hit to have them. Oh, you know what? We tore all that stuff down.
Yeah.
Have that happen.
And I think these days, I guess from the lessons of Star Wars in a way, that it's like don't throw anything away, because it's like even like all the creature designs that get rejected, but they might come back in 10-15 years, so it's
absolutely.
Yeah, so I think learning from that, I hope that Netflix and Jim Henson Company are sort of taking that route of let's preserve everything, keep everything in as much intact as possible. The other thing to talk about with that nearly forgot about with the Crystal Shard fan group, for all the listeners, we are actually doing a giveaway as part of the Facebook group. And what we're doing, I think you can probably talk a bit about it, but there's going to be a giveaway that once the group reaches about 1,000 members, that we're going to give away a poster, and this poster was from a project that Jamie and I, we were working on it together at the time, called The Great Conjunction, the Legacy of the Dark Crystal. Which is really cool, and it's such a great poster. I know
it's a beautiful poster. I love looking at it.
Yeah, and
the whole the crystal with the Skeksis and the Uru, and it's a simple poster, but it's beautiful. I'm envious of the person who wins it because it would look beautiful on my wall.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, and because I know we did do a contest a long time ago where we did give away a couple of the posters and whatnot. So these are sort of they're very rare, in terms of Dark Crystal collectors kind of thing. But yeah, it was something. I mean, for anyone that's sort of new to the show, want to know what that project was about. So overall, Jamie and I were going to do a documentary about the impact of the franchise or of the Dark Crystal, and we had hoped to interview people who worked on the films and all that kind of stuff. And we did do an Indiegogo campaign that was sort of a bit unsuccessful, to try and raise funds to make it happen. And unfortunately, it didn't work out in the end. But yeah, we wanted, but we still had all this great art, and especially with the poster.
It's a beautiful poster. It really is.
Yeah, that Simon Fuller did with that poster. So we still wanted to as something to give away to one lucky fan,
one lucky member.
Yeah.
So I remember when Jamie had proposed this to me, and I was looking at our group numbers, and he proposed that when we were at like, I don't know, 50 or 60 members. And I was like, I will be happy if we reach 100. And so we've gone just a little bit past 100. I don't know if I'm thinking when Age of Resistance comes out, our numbers can jump from really small to really big quickly. I think we're going to get a lot of fans out there on Facebook looking for people who want to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the sort of same thing with the podcast as well. It is a very small kind of culty show at the moment. But yeah, once Age of Resistance comes out, that's when I think there'll be a big surge for the podcast. And also for, with all these Facebook groups that are happening. Which is really, really cool.
I'm really looking forward to it. Actually, I'm wanting to see new people come into it. I mean, my son, he's 18 years old, and The Dark Crystal is one of his favorite movies. Now I can say I had a little bit of influence on that because I watch it quite a bit, but he loves it too, and he loves the story, and he loves talking to me about it, and I love hearing things from his perspective because he's a new fan. Right. And so that's the things I want to hear. I want to hear these people engaging and asking questions that maybe you and I have heard, hundreds of times. But then they come in and they're showing their enthusiasm by asking these questions. And so I hope that fans, old fans of the Dark Crystal can embrace the new fans and kind of make it all a really good experience for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's all these fan groups are just such a fun time. With reading it all, and I mean that's the first thing I do. Every time I wake up in the morning, I always check out the Crystal Shard first thing in the morning just to see all the posts that I guess that you all do during the day in the US because of the time zones. So,
I do quite a few posts. Yeah, I do.
yeah. And it's just incredible. Just the amount of the other members sort of contributing, to posting about the Dark Crystal, and I'm happy to be a part of it. With posting things about Trial by Stone. So it's really cool.
So one of the other things I wanted to point out about our Crystal Shard group is just a few days ago I started an Artist of the Month. I don't know if you saw that or not. So we have in the Dream Fasting group and in the Age of Resistance group, of course they have thousands of members, but a lot of those members joined my group as well, and they are some very talented artists, like some extremely talented artists. And I had the pleasure of talking with one of them the other day, Lavinia, and she is remarkable. In her drawings and her sculptures are just phenomenal. And so I wanted to try to bring that out to the other artists in the group, and I wanted to see, I want them to contribute something to this. And so, and even if I don't get any any nominations for an artist of the month, well, I know a few of them that are artists, so
Yeah.
I'll highlight them anyway.
Yeah, no, totally. And yeah, it is awesome to, to at least, have some things, as part of the group to get fans that are interested in, doing some art here and there, whether it's a painting or a sculpture. To just have that sort of highlight for, for each month. So no, it's really cool to at least have some kind of interactivity every now and then with these fan groups. So no, it is really cool. And also with the giveaway on top of it is it is pretty cool. So I definitely suggest all the listeners to to check out this this fan group. And I think the best way to search for it, I think if you just go on Facebook and if you just type in the Crystal Shard, it should appear in the top search results.
It should be the first one. I don't think there's any other group out there that has that kind of name. So
yeah, yeah. So no, which is cool. So I think we'll probably wrap it up. But yeah, Doug, I just wanted to say thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It was great. You're my first podcast. So
oh, no, that's awesome, and I'm sure we'll get you back on for many more podcasts to come, eh?
Absolutely, anytime.
You've already taken too long, Gelfling. Hurry!
At last, the crystal calls. It is time to return to the castle.
The crystal calls! To the crystal chamber!
So that's all the time that we have for this episode of Trial by Stone. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. We're also on Twitter at darkcrystalpod. We're also on Instagram at darkcrystalpodcast. If you enjoyed the show and think that others will love it too, please write a review on iTunes or on Facebook as well. I'll greatly appreciate that. And if you're watching this on YouTube, hit the like button and subscribe. Thank you all so much, and come back next time for more Trial by Stone.